third time's the charm, right? Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. My name is Brianna and this is For Pause in a Book. I make bookish videos over here on my little corner of the internet, so if that's something that you're interested in, make sure that you hit the subscribe button down below. Today it is time for the Our Fantasy Bingo Board for 2024 and 2025. This is a reading challenge that takes place obviously on Our Fantasy on Reddit, and it's a bingo board. There are 25 spaces and there are prompts and you like pick books to read throughout the year. It goes from April to March, which I kind of love because there are so many year-long challenges that happen from like January to December as a calendar year. And then all of that end of year content kind of gets lost. So having this in April kind of works for me. So I'm excited about it, and I'm very excited about a lot of these prompts. Some of them are a little bit difficult. But we're going to be talking about some pile of possibilities for this. Now, obviously, this might change. And I'd like to do a sit down in about 6 months and see where we are on this, because I do read a lot of books for SwiftBow, which I have no idea which books those are going to be for the upcoming year. So those might change. Some of these might change. I do also really want to prioritize my physical TBR this year. And so trying to find books that match these prompts on my physical TBR is also important to me. What I'm going to do is I'm going to be picking out like a couple of different options for each one. Some of them only have one option. Like some of these are so difficult. I got very close last year, and then the year before I think I was only missing one, and this past year I think I was missing 3 or 4. So I just didn't make it a priority. This year, we're going to try to do it better. So this reading challenge is getting really popular on BookTube, especially this year. I know a lot of people are going to be doing it. I was originally introduced to it through Cassidy and Rachel. So I've been doing this for 3 years now, and I've tried to hit hero mode on every single one of them. Now, there's a lot of different ways that you can do this. So there's the easy mode, which is the one prompt. And then there's a hard mode, which is a prompt on top of the prompt. So they have to match both. And then there is hero mode, and that just means that you have to review every book that you put on here. I will always hit hero mode because I review books on YouTube and I also review on Goodreads. So I'll always hit hero mode, but my goal is to hit hard mode with all of these. So all of the books that I'm going to be choosing, I think, will at least try to hit hard mode according to the Our Fantasy recommendations. Most of these have been on here. So a couple of extra rules for this. Now these are like very loose. You can do whatever you want on this reading challenge, but basically anything that's speculative, it counts. So fantasy, sci-fi, also some horror will count. The other rule is that you can only use an author one time, which does make it hard, but the whole point of this project is to like broaden your horizons, read new authors, read new things that you wouldn't necessarily pick up. So they want you to like expand your horizons, so you can only use an author for one square. You also can only use one book per square. You can't like double up. And then the other thing is that they want to limit the amount of rereads that you do. I think they said that you can do one reread. That could be like an unspoken rule that just kind of like started existing. I don't know if that's official or not. Other than that, you do you. We're gonna start at the top of the bingo board here, and we're just gonna go across each row. So the first one is first in a series, and the hard mode for it is that series has to have at least 4 books in the series. So it says more than 3, so it can't be a trilogy. And that is hard for a couple of reasons. One, I read a lot of trilogies. Like every book that I was looking at, I was like, that's a duology, that's a trilogy. So that was harder. And then also, I'm really good at starting series. It's the finishing the series that is the problem for me. You know, I have a whole video where I talk about how many series I'm in the middle of, and it is atrocious. And it didn't help. Like we have not fixed the problem in 2024 so far. So I'm very good at reading the first books in series. It is the rest of the series that is the problem. But I do have one for sure that will work. I feel like there are probably a couple of fantasy romance series that will work, but this one I know will. So Blood and Steel by Helen Schroer. I read Slaying the Shadow Prince in March and absolutely loved it, and so I bought Blood and Steel. This has 3 books out currently, but book 4 I think is being released this fall. Don't quote me on that. And this is a obviously fantasy romance. It's got a stabby main character, and everyone was reading it during Ramadan and loving it. So I have a feeling I will love it as well. After everything I've heard about it, I think I'm gonna love it. So this will likely be the #1 spot here, but again, that could change. Next up on the board is an alliterative title, which means that at least 2 of the words start with the same letter, and the hard mode is that 3 of the words have to start with the same letter. And let me tell you, this was also really hard. But I have When Women Were Dragons by Kelly Barnhill. This is a book that I've had on my shelf for a long time, like maybe since release. Very closely. Fierce, feminist, and funny. I really loved Kelly Barnhill's middle grade series, and this is about an event that happens where like hundreds of thousands of women sprouted wings, scales, and talons and took to the skies. And there's like a whole like social commentary about that on like, was it their choice to become dragons? Was it a disease? All those things. So it's like part fantasy, but like also part dystopian. I don't know. But there are 3 W's in here, so it's gonna count. The next prompt is under the surface, so the book needs to have a scene or takes place at least part way under the sea or underground. And the hard mode for this is at least 50% has to be underwater or underground. So I have a couple of options for this, and I think it's probably stretching it a little bit to say that they'll hit the hard mode. I don't know for one of them. So I am doing a reread of Into the Drowning Deep by Mary Grant. So if I want to use my one reread, then I could put that there. However, I just got my Illumicrate box for March, and Fathom Folk by Eliza Chan was on here. Someone had said that this one definitely does take place under the sea, but it's kind of like a 60-40 split. There was some debate as to whether or not this would hit the hard mode. Some people said it definitely would. Some people were like, no, I'm not so sure. So we'll have to see, but I definitely want to read this one sooner rather than later. Plus it's gorgeous. This book is about killer mermaids. That's, you know, all I need to say. And this is about a society. It's a political fantasy where there are like 2 castes of people. We have the humans and then the lower caste of people that are selkies and mermaids and sirens and things like that. And there's this like political unrest, we'll say that. It definitely sounds like it's something that's going to be up my alley. The next spot on the board is criminals, and so the main character has to be a criminal, and the hard mode is that it has to involve a heist. So I do have one book that I own, one book that I'm also really interested in and may own by the end of the year. So we'll see which one I decide to read first. The first one is actually a sci-fi, and that is Into the Sunken City by Dinesh Thuru. This is a YA dystopian in the underwater town, almost underwater town in Arizona. Which those 2 words, you know, don't necessarily go together. But our main character is a criminal. She is a thief. She used to dive with her father. There was a tragic accident. And then there is this heist because someone said like, hey, there's a lot of treasure in Las Vegas. Let's go do a dive there. So there is a heist here. Other than that, I don't know much about it. I heard someone talk about it on a wrap-up recently and then was very excited, found it very cheap on Pango and bought it. The other one that I'm really interested in is A Tempest of Tea by Hafsa Fazal. This is like sold as for fans of Six of Crows, which I absolutely love that book. So that intrigues me, and there is a heist here, meaning that there are criminals. The last square on the first row is dreams. So there just has to be some sort of like dream sequence in here. This is where the hard mode gets hard. The hard mode is that the dream has to be mundane. There can't be any magic to it. It can't be like, you know, you going into this other world. Like, it has to be just a normal dream. That's where it gets hard. I think that there could be some fantasy romance that like it pops up because there's a lot of times where like there's trauma in fantasy romance, and so they're like awoken from a nightmare, something like that. Also, when I was looking at the Our Fantasy recommendations board, someone said that there was a dream in The Witch's Heart. So this is also a book that I'm reading for a vlog this month. So we'll see very quickly whether or not I can check this off. I don't know if it's going to be magical or not. Someone was like, yeah, I think it'll hit hard mode. So you never know with the Our Fantasy recommendations. Some people are like, yeah, it definitely works, and it really doesn't. So, I mean,
someone said Fourth Wing was queer, so.
But anyways, we'll see if this one works. This is about like the wife of Loki. Sounds up my alley. And then also on that recommendations was The Mask of Mirrors by M.A. Carrick, but I don't think that this one will hit hard mode because this actually has like nightmare magic. So it's probably going to be magical. It's not going to hit hard mode. All right, moving down to the second row. The first one is entitled Animals. So that just means that there has to be an animal in the title. And then the hard mode is that animal has to be some sort of mythical being. Can't be a real thing. So if you weren't doing hard mode, you could do something like Six of Crows, The Raven Boys, stuff like that. But when I was picking out my books that like I want to read, I realized I have a lot of dragon books. So we have Dragonfall, we have To Shape a Dragon's Breath, we have His Majesty's Dragon, and our Boozy Book Club pick for April is Dragon Fruit. This one will likely be the one that I pick, unless it will fit somewhere else. I'm not sure. But Anyways, I'm gonna probably read a dragon book. The next prompt is bards. So the easy mode is that the main character has to be a bard, a musician, a poet, storyteller, something like that. And then the hard mode is that they specifically have to be a bard. Like titled a bard. This one was probably the hardest of all of them, but A River Enchanted by Rebecca Ross. I have had this on my shelf for quite some time. I've heard really good things about it, and I didn't think it would hit hard mode. This one wasn't one that I immediately thought of. In the synopsis, it says 10 years after being sent away to the mainland to become a bard. So our main character is a bard. That's all I know about this book, but I have heard really, really good things about it. And it's a duology, so it's a really quick series that I can maybe binge if I love this one. The next spot is prologues and epilogues. So it has to have a prologue or an epilogue. And then the hard mode is that it has to have both a prologue and an epilogue. And that is hard because a lot of series, like the first book will have a prologue and the last book will have an epilogue. Very rarely in series do you see a prologue and an epilogue in book one specifically. But I found two. One of them is a standalone. But The Jasmine Throne by Tasha Suri has both a prologue and an epilogue. Is the epilogue 1 page long? Yes. Yes, it is. Counts though. This one you might see pop up a couple times, and since you can't double up on prompts, this one may not end up working here. But this is a sapphic epic fantasy with a little bit of romance, and it's been on my TBR for way too long, and I know I'm gonna love it. And then I also have The City of Stardust by Georgia Summers. It has both a prologue and an epilogue. This is a contemporary fantasy, and a lot of people read it during Realmathon and really liked it, so I'm excited about it. Contemporary fantasy worries me a little bit, but there's magic, there's family curses, there's gods, there's revenge. It has a lot of my buzzwords, so I'm hopeful, but we'll see what happens. The next prompt is self-publish. Just read a self-published book. And then the hard mode is read a book that has less than 100 ratings. And I will use a Spiffbo book for this, so I'm not gonna put one in place right now. 90% of the Spiffbo books that are entered have less than 100 ratings, at least at the beginning stages. Once they hit the finalist stage, they do get over 100 ratings, although not always. But especially in the early phases, when the 300 are still being whittled down to the 10 finalists, there's a lot in there that have 4 or 5 ratings. I remember last year when I was part of Cassidy's team, there was one where I was the first rating, and that was nerve-wracking. The next prompt is romantasy. We saw this one coming a mile away. Romantasy is definitely popular right now. It's definitely trending, and I have no issues with completing this square. The hard mode is that the main character is LGBTQ+. So I have a couple of options for this one, and I also think that I will probably find more once I get to a Polycon, because there's always queer fantasy romance. But someone said that Feybound by Sarah Al-Arafi was queer, or was sapphic, I think. I don't know. We'll have to see. But I am reading this one for a vlog project, so should be able to get to this one pretty soon. Again, The Jasmine Throne, I think probably could work as a romantasy. Their definition of romantasy is literally fantasy with a romantic plot. And I know this one has a romantic plot. I think it's probably second to the political unrest and upheaval that is happening in this book, but the romance exists. And then we have A Taste of Golden Iron by Alexandra Rowland. This is a male romantasy. I still can't say romantasy. I don't know. My brain doesn't want to say it. I actually picked this one for the Queer Norm Society and was going to read it last year, and then a Spiffbo book that I had to read worked for it as well. So I didn't end up reading it. It's been sitting on my shelf for a year. So this one might also happen. I have a couple of recommendations for this one. I'm not giving recommendations for every single book or for every single prompt, but for this one I specifically want to. So if you're stretching what the definition of fantasy is, every single one of Katie Roberts' books has queer characters in it. In the Neon Gods universe specifically, books 2, 3, 5, and 6 have queer main characters. When I say it stretches the fantasy, is definitely urban, but there is this veil over the city where it makes it hard for you to go into the underworld, which is Hades section. So there's a little bit of fantasy in it. You can read books 1 and 2 out of order, but once you hit book 3, it's definitely something you want to read in a series. Then we have In the Ravenous Dark by A.M. Strickland. This is YA, but it definitely reads older YA, so there's no smut in here, and it's it's more fantasy, but there is romance to it. And this is Polly, and there are queer characters in the triad. And this takes place in hell. There's blood magic. It's a good time. We have Bonded by Thorns, and then this is actually like a quartet. So, you know, there are multiple in the series. And this is also Polly, and there are lots of queer characters in here. And this is a Fae Beauty and the Beast retelling, but the Beast is for Fae princes. And then if you're looking for a book that doesn't have like a huge romantic subplot, like maybe you're not a romance reader, and so this prompt specifically was like, oh, I don't necessarily like that. Let me introduce you to Legacy of the Vermilion Blade by J. Tosquall. This was in SPIFBO last year. It didn't make it to the finals. It might have been a semi-finalist. I don't remember actually. And this has 2 ace characters as the main characters. So there's a little bit of romance in it, but there's no smut. And there's some conversation about being ace, and it's a very queer norm society. And this is just a really sweet book. It's very low stakes. It's kind of like reading The Hobbit, but make it really gay. I really enjoyed this one. I need to continue the series. It came out last fall. This also has an audiobook that came out on Spotify, 1 episode or 1 like chapter at a time, which was a really fun way to listen to it. Moving down to the next row, the first prompt is dark academia, so school setting, something like that. They're pretty broad on their definition of what dark academia is, and I feel like not everybody has the same definition, so like you do whatever whatever. But the hard mode is that the school itself has to be mundane, so no magic school or anything like that, no dragon riding academy. So that's what made it harder because I have a lot of dark academia books, but most of them are like magical schools, because that's where my like love of dark academia lies. I do think that Ninth House would definitely work for this. So if you haven't read that one, Ninth House would be a great one because it's just Yale. There's just magic happening in this secret society. I also have The Cloisters by Katie Hayes. This I think is dark academia. It was on the Our Fantasy recommendation, so we're gonna go with it. And they live in New York, so that makes it pretty mundane. I don't know if it's NYU or I don't know. We'll see when we get there, I guess. But there's like tarot reading and stuff like that. This feels like it could be really up my alley. We'll see what happens. The other recommendation that I saw on there was actually Spy Family, which I don't like. I wouldn't call Spy Family dark academia, but it is like a lot of the volumes do take place at a school, especially ones where it focuses on the little girl. So it could work if you like stretch your definition of dark academia. So I'm on volume 7, I believe. So maybe one of those volumes could work. The next prompt is multi-POV, which generally happens in fantasy. You usually have like 2 to 3 at least. But the hard mode is 5 POV characters. And that's where we struggled, because I don't necessarily like huge cast of characters in my books. Like I could read Game of Thrones, that would work. So in my search of our fantasy recommendation board, someone mentioned The Bone Shard Daughter by Andrea Stewart. So this might have 5 POV characters, I don't know. Someone also mentioned The Sons of Darkness by Gaurav Mohanty, which I really do want to read because it's so pretty. And this is like an epic high fantasy, but I don't know if there are 5 characters or 5 POV characters. And that's one of the problems with this prompt, is that like you don't really know until you start reading the book, unless you're like flipping through the chapters and it actually has their name on it. So this is one we might have to like come back to. The next prompt is published in 2024, and the hard mode is that it's an author's debut. This is another one that I usually will hit through SPIFBO, because most of them are 2024 releases. Not all of them, but a lot of them are, and a lot of them this is their first book. So this is not one that I have something picked out. There are a lot of books that I could use for this. There are a lot of debut authors coming out in 2024. So I have options, but I'm not picking something right now. The next prompt is a character with a disability, and the hard mode is the main character has a disability. I think the easiest option for this, and what a lot of people are going to be doing, is Onyx Storm by Rebecca Yarros. This is the 3rd book in the 4th Wing series, and our main character does have a physical disability. In the definition of this prompt, it said physical or mental disability, and so actually I have already ticked off this. It is April 3rd and I have already got one, because I read Dark Knight Golden Dawn by Alison Carr Wichter. I'm reading this for a fantasy romance vlog prior to going to a Polycon, because this author is going to be there, so I wanted to try out some author's works. I will let you know more about the book during the vlog, but I think it was done really, really well. And our main character has PTSD from a previous relationship, and let me tell you, the PTSD rep was done so well, and the scene where she handles it with her new partner was so sexy. I have already ticked off this box, so I have a lot of options that I could have used for this, but here we are. I've already ticked it off. The next prompt, I say a lot of these have been the hardest, but this one might have actually been the hardest. But that is a book that was published in the 90s, in the 1990s, and the hard mode was that the author has also published something within the last 5 years, and that's where we got, where it got a little, we struggled a little bit. But I have actually never read Good Omens by Neil Gaiman. He also published something in 2021, I believe, so we're still within that 5-year mark. I've watched the Amazon Prime show, the first season of it. I never continued. I need to do that. Very bad at continuing. See, I'm bad at continuing series on TV. I'm bad at continuing series in books. It's a personal problem. But I really liked the show. Part of it was because it was David Tennant. But I've never read the book. So we're going to do that and see if I like it. I hope I will. Neil Gaiman is super hit or miss for me. There's some books that I've really loved, like Neverwhere. 5-star book for me. And then like the Ocean Across the Lane, the House Across the, whatever that one is, I don't know. That was a 1-star book for me. So like, it's hit or miss. So hopefully I like this one, but it does fit the hard mode. All right, moving down to the next row. This is where it gets funny. So the next prompt is orcs, trolls, and goblins, something like that. So one character has to be one of those things. And the hard mode is that the main character, or a main character, has to be that. I didn't really have anything. I might have something on my Kindle, thanks to Stuff Your Kindle Day, but I don't normally pick up monster romances on Stuff Your Kindle Day, so I don't think I have any. So I put in the Kindle, I went into Kindle Unlimited, and I just searched orcs, and the very first one that came up just made me giggle, and so now I have to read it, and that is 50 Shades of Orc, and it's a 50 Shades retelling, but the main character shapeshifts into an orc. So there's that. It's 100 pages. We're gonna speed through it real fast, and it's gonna be a fun time. Might not be a good time, but it's gonna be a fun time. The next prompt is a space opera, which hit or miss for me again. And the hard mode is that the author needs to be from a marginalized community. So gender, race, sex, sexual orientation, something. So I might be cheating with this a little bit. I don't know if this one specifically is a space opera, but the greater world of Star Wars is the definition of a space opera. I Googled it. Is Star Wars a space opera? It came up. Star Wars is essentially the definition of a space opera. So I'm going to be reading Inquisitor, Rise of the Red Blade by Delilah S. Dawson. I got this one last year during the Barnes & Noble 50% off, or whatever sale I do now. And I truly do not know what part of the story this is in. I don't know what it's about, but it looked cool. Rise of the Red Blade kind of makes me think it's going to be a Sith story, and I'm here for that. So we're going to read this one. I actually have a couple of Star Wars novels that I could use, but this one is the only one that I haven't read that is written by a woman. So that's a marginalized community. I actually have a couple of recommendations for this one that I'm going to just throw out there if you want another Star Wars one. Path of Deceit by Tessa Gratton and Justina Ireland. This is about like a planet on the outskirts of the universe, the galaxy, whatever, and it really takes a look at the Force as a religion, and this was so well done. Love this one. And if you're like, Brie, Star Wars is not my thing, no. Everina Maxwell, might I recommend her books? Winter's Orbit and Ocean's Echo are both space operas. They're kind of Star Wars inspired, but obviously their own universe, and they're very queer. We love that. All right, the next prompt is an author of color, and the hard mode for this is it was a debut book published in the last 5 years. I have so many options for this. All of these will work for this. The Surviving Sky by Kritika H. Rao. This is a like sci-fi book about a jungle planet that's floating the last refuges of humanity. Plant-made civilizations. I have The Book Eaters by Suni Dean. This is literally about like a society that eats books to like absorb knowledge, and then someone starts eating people, I think. I'm not really sure. So they're trying to like wipe out that. I don't know. But I've had it on my TBR for way too long. The Jasad Heir by Sarah Hashim is a like epic fantasy romance. The Chain Gang All-Stars is a near future dystopian sci-fi where prisoners are forced to go to gladiator games, but there is some like sci-fi elements to this. And then if I want to read my Illumicrate books, which I should probably do, I could read The Principle of Moments. This is so pretty. And this is a sci-fi time travel book. It takes place partially in like the 1950s. Nope, 1812. Don't know where I got the 1950s. 1812, and then also 6066. So there's some time travel happening. I think the person from 6000 gets stuck in 1812. I think is pretty much the overarching plot of this. But all of these will work, and probably more. The next prompt is survival, which is pretty broad. They have a very loose interpretation of the word survival. So you can use pretty much anything for this. So I have a lot of sci-fi books here. Actually, I think they're all sci-fi, but yeah, they are. The hard mode for this is that it can't be a super virus or a pandemic that they are trying to survive. So couple of things, a lot of cli-fi on here. Into the Sunken City would work for this. Again, on the recommendations board, they had The Gracier by Kim Liggett. This is like them trying to escape a cult or like survive a cult. The Surviving Sky would also work for this. Another cli-fi. The Chain Gang All-Stars would work for this. Literally trying to survive a gladiator pit. And then also one that's on my April TBR, but I have heard very mixed reviews about it, so I don't know if it'll end up becoming a DNF or not, but we'll see. The Light Pirate by Lily Brooks Dalton is another like cli-fi book where they are trying to survive the world ending because of climate change. The last one on this row is kind of fun. It's judge a book by its cover. And the hard mode is don't even read the blurb, just pick a book up based on its cover and read it. Which, you know, as someone who researches books quite a bit before picking them up, or at least hearing somebody talk about them, this one might be hard. So I think what my plan is either A, I'm just going to go into Barnes & Noble one day and I'm going to buy a book and I'm going to read it right then, right there, before like anybody says anything about it, or I might do that with a Polycon, because there are some like special editions that'll be out. I didn't pre-order anything at a Polycon, but I imagine there will be some sort of overstock, something that they might be selling on the last day, who knows. So that's what I might do, is pick up a Polycon book that I just like, I have no idea what it's about. Plus all fantasy romances have great covers. So that's another option. Moving it down to the final row, the first prompt is small town. And the hard mode for this is that the small town can be fictional, but the broader setting has to take place in our world. So it can't be like a fantastical world. And so I think this is really where horror is going to shine. I think Black Sheep is a great option for this, and also Darcy Coates. She like thrives in this little realm because a lot of her books take place in small towns. So I'm gonna go that route, and I'm gonna read Where He Can't Find You by Darcy Coates. This is her newest horror, and I've heard really good things about this one. It does take place in a small town, and it's about the Stitcher and this like person-esque thing that is like, you know, stalking, scaring the townspeople. I've heard really good things about it, and like I've never been steered wrong by Darcy. The next prompt is short stories, and so the prompt is to read 5 short stories, and then the hard mode is to read the entire anthology, which is what I would be doing anyways. There's a lot that I could read for this one. There's one in the David Bad trilogy that I've like continued to put on this TBR every single year, because this prompt is there every single year. There's also one called Out There. It's not on my physical TBR, I don't own it, but this is queer sci-fi short stories. I'm not a big short story girly, but they do work really well for like weekend readathons. So in a pinch, I could read one then. The next one is Eldritch Creatures. I could be saying that wrong. And this is like an otherworldly, non-earthly creature. And the hard mode is that it can't be related to the Cthulhu myth. I actually truly do not know what that means, but upon researching and looking at the recommendations board, Annihilation was one that was recommended that would hit hard mode, and I have this one, and it's short, and I actually kind of want to read this one sooner rather than later for another project. So this one will probably end up being the one that works for it. Then the next one is reference materials. So it has to have some sort of reference material in it. A map, glossary, a footnote, like something that is like an addition to the world. And the hard mode is that it has to have at least 2 different things. I have so many that will work for this. As I was going through the recommendations, I was like, I own that one, I own that one, I own that one. And so like that board did all of the work for me. I didn't actually have to go and look. So a couple of these are repeats. Again, Mask of Mirrors has both a map and then also a glossary. Of course, we have Babel by R.F. Kuang. This has 2 maps and also footnotes. We have the Tainted Cup that has a map and then also a list of the military rankings in this world, which I would consider reference materials. We have The Final Strife by Sarah Al-Arafi, and this has both a map and a glossary. I wouldn't be able to use this if I read Feybound for the other prompt because it's the same author, but if I do a different one, then this will work. We have the London Seance Society by Sarah Penner. This one might be stretching it a little bit, but it has the 7 stages of a seance at the beginning, and then at the end it has this like newspaper post that's like further reading in the world. So it's not necessarily related to the story, but it is to like the greater world. So I would consider that reference material, I would say. I think so. And then this also could be a reason to pick up the 5th season by N.K. Jemisin. This has a map at the beginning and 2 appendices at the end. So, and also, I don't know if this is just my version of it, but there's an entire section just called extras. So I don't even know what's in that. Ooh, I got really dark for a second. And then lastly, I do need to finish this duology, so this would like work perfectly. It, you know, knocks a series off. But The Blood Gift by Annie Davenport. But this has a map at the beginning and a like list of characters at the end and like how they interact with like, you know, their ranking, all of this other fun stuff. The final prompt on here is a book club, and it's actually supposed to be the Our Fantasy book club. And unfortunately, they're not great about like being ahead on what they like kind of tell you at the beginning of the month. Hey, we're reading this. And then if you participate, like the hard mode is like participating in the current month's conversation about whatever book they're reading. So I'll just have to like pay attention to their Goodreads page and the Our Fantasy page to see if it's something that like I am reading or have read this past year, and then we'll count it and we'll, you know, discuss in there. I am allowed to swap out one prompt with a past prompt, and a lot of times it ends up being the book club one, so it might end up being it again. Who knows? But those are the 25 prompts for Our Fantasy. I'm hoping to do better this year and get all of the prompts, get a blackout in hard mode. That's the goal. Let me know in the comments below if you are doing Our Fantasy, and if you have a prompt for one of these, especially the ones that are harder, comment it down below because we'll just use this comment thread as another recommendations board. And if you're not feeling chatty, do some sort of flower emoji in the comments below. That's all I have for you today. If you're new here and you have not yet subscribed, there's a little button that you can do so down below the video. If you'd like to hang out with me more, the links to my Instagram, Goodreads, Twitter, and my Patreon are linked in the description below. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye!